This is Lightning Power Lunch with Dave Mishkin and Greg Linnelli on Lightning Radio.
I think our power play got us going there, and we just stuck to the game plan and listen to what we needed to do, and we got it done.
You had a big milestone today, 600 assists. Being able to accomplish that, what does that mean to you?
Cool.
Extremely proud. Obviously one of the greatest that played on this team. So, and 600 and counting, I hope. Just again, exceptional player. Big reason that we haven't successed the last few years. So, yeah, can't say enough.
So we tried to address the penalty issue. It didn't quite work out that way, but I thought, the way we came out in that second period, it's a 1-0 game, and all of a sudden it's a 4-0 game in the first 4 minutes. So that was, clearly the turning point in this game. But, like I said, it's a funny game. It's hard to come back in this league, but you're always feeling, stress at some point, and with the amount of penalties we took. So there was a little bit of stress during the game, but we got through it.
Yeah, they did. Hello, everybody. Welcome. Doesn't feel like a Monday, does it? Most people have off today, partner. If you have kids, of course, even in the work office, you're off MLK. And just a bunch of stuff going on today, in addition to Lightning and Leafs tonight at 7:30, which I think most circumstances in the hockey world, this would be a must-watch game. But we know we have college football tonight. We've got the inauguration going on. It is a jam-packed day
That
today.
should be over by 7:30 Eastern.
You would think. You would think. You just never know. But a lot going on. A good game, I think, tonight for both the Leafs and Lightning. At least they're both hoping. I think you and I are excited to talk about where these two teams are. We should get to a couple of news items out of the game.
Yep.
You are on the scene.
I'm on the scene.
So you can hear the skates and
wrapping up. The Lightning are. In fact, it's basically done.
Yeah.
So J.J. Moser is getting extra work. That's good news. Look, I mentioned he was on the trip, the last trip. The Lightning didn't have a lot of practice time, honestly, but Moser was with the group on the Tuesday morning in Boston, and he was with the group this morning, and he's being put through the paces. So not fun for Moser, but It's a good sign in terms of his trajectory, in terms of his rehab. There's one other player down at the other end of the ice just getting some extra work. But the backup goalie tonight is out there getting work with Moser, and that backup goalie tonight is Andrei Vasilevskiy.
Ooh.
So Jonas Johansson gets the start tonight.
Yes.
Something that we were wondering about the second half of the road trip with how the Lightning were going to work the goalie rotation at Chicago, at Detroit, and we were pretty confident that Johansson would get the Chicago game because the Detroit game is a divisional game, and Vasi will get that game. I think a lot of us were under the expectation maybe a couple of weeks ago when we were looking at this weird road trip because it's 2 back-to-backs. So you would figure Johansson's getting half of the games. Mm-hmm. That Vasi would get the Toronto game and Johansson would get the Montreal game because the Montreal game is the second half of the back-to-back. Not so. And in fact, Phil, before Saturday's game against Detroit, looking ahead to this road trip, stated, he didn't really make a prediction, but he gave his opinion. He said, I think Johansson should play against Toronto and Vasi should play the game against Montreal. In his mind, catching Toronto is less important than keeping Montreal behind you, essentially. That was his logic, and maybe the Lightning agreed. So, and also Vasi has struggled a little bit against Toronto. At some point that issue is going to have to be addressed, but
Can't run away from
Vasi
that,
has
though,
lost
right?
a couple of games against Toronto and not played particularly well in either one of those games. So they're going to hold him for tomorrow's game against Montreal, and Johansson gets the start tonight against Toronto. I want to say Johansson played 2 games against the Leafs last year. I remember the game at Amalie, which the Lightning, talking about last year, early in the year, while Vasi was still recovering from his post-surgery rehab, essentially, or recovering from surgery and in post-surgery rehab. Johansson, in that game at Amalie Arena in the early part of last year, the Lightning lost in overtime, but Johansson was incredible. Like, I think the Leafs had over 50 shots in that game. So, look, that's the way the goalie rotation is going to play out, and hopefully Johansson will give the Lightning another good game, as he has done really for certainly this year. And recently, he has given the Lightning some key performances to help them win games or get points out of games. The other bit of news is that Eric Chernak did not participate in the morning skate.
Right.
So even though he is day-to-day, today is not the day that he returns. So the Lightning did a roster move yesterday really for cap management circumstances and advantages. They sent Crozier back to Syracuse, and he is back up today, kind of a paper transaction, so they got to save a day on his salary yesterday, and the Lightning are going to go with the same lineup that we saw against Detroit, except the starting goalie is different. Thank you, Steve. He had Johansson with 48 saves in that game at Amalie last year, which was an over 50-shot game for Toronto. It was 4-3 Leafs. So what, they had 52 shots in that game. Look, the Lightning would love it if he gave them a performance like that tonight. They just don't want to give up 52 shots tonight to the Leafs.
He's been, as a backup goaltender, he's been one of the better ones the Lightning have had in the history of their franchise, Johansson. You mentioned, it kind of goes into last year. I mean, he's been really good and kind of righted the ship there after training camp. He's been fantastic. When I saw Crozier, the transaction when he was being sent down, I said to myself, all right, that means Chernak's back. And, Crozier, because remember I asked you the question, if he plays well, does he stay? Now, we're not going to find that out until everybody is healthy, if and when that does happen. But I was kind of like, oh, man, I felt like Crozier played a whale of a game.
He did. We can get into Saturday's game, too.
And we are going to get into that. I want to, don't forget, I want to give you my bold prediction at the end of the show, and it's going to deal with that. But let's get into the Red Wings first, and then we'll kind of get into Toronto and what happens tonight, what we're going to be looking for. But the Lightning, the ability partner to pick up a couple of points against the Red Wings, that's exactly what you were looking for. They erupt with 4 in the second. Kuch and Gensel had big games. Of course, Kucherov had a highlight reel goal that we can get into. But let's dive into that first, and then we can kind of get into what we saw or what we're going to see potentially in that Toronto game tonight.
Well, where I want to start with the Detroit game is with Detroit, because it's the first time we've seen the Red Wings, and it's the first time we've seen the Red Wings playing well, right? I mean, like, the start of their year was different than how they've played since the coaching change, and they lost their first game under Todd McClellan, but then they rattled off 7 straight wins. Many of those games were at home, but not all of them. They had a road win in Winnipeg, which is a quality win. And then they lost their last game on a homestand, and then they went to Sunrise and beat the Panthers. So they were 8-1 in their previous 9 coming into the game on Saturday, and it moved to within, 5 points of the Lightning in the standings. The Lightning still had, I think, 1 game in hand at that point. The Red Wings, again, played last night and lost, so we can kind of get into what happened with them. So it was clear that their power play had really helped them during their, we'll call it their good stretch of going 8-1. It had won them some games. Under Todd McClellan prior to Saturday, they had gone 17 for 34 on the power play, which is just insane. That's 50%, obviously, and not 50% over a 2 or 3 game span. It's over a 10 game span where they had a fair number of power play chances. So their power play was certainly humming, and their top offensive guys were really playing well. Larkin was playing well, scoring. DeBrincat was playing well, scoring. Kane was playing well, scoring. Lucas Raymond was playing well, scoring. But they were defending okay, too. Like, it's not like they were winning games 6-5. I mean, they had one high-scoring game in Columbus. They won 5-4. But generally, they'd been keeping the puck out of their net at a better rate than prior to the coaching change. So what I saw on Saturday was a team that is very dynamic offensively and very dynamic on the power play. The Lightning dodged a huge bullet, putting the Red Wings on the power play 6 times. And I looked it up, Greg. 6 kills in a game is a high for the Lightning this year. That was the first time all season that they had been shorthanded 6 times, and they did it against the hottest power play in the NHL coming into that game. They were able to navigate through it, with a huge dose of Vasilevskiy and hard work by the penalty killers, but there's no question the Red Wings had some chances during their power plays, and they scored their one goal on the power play. I thought the Red Wings were very, very good with the puck, so that they did a good job limiting turnovers, and they dominated possession.
They did.
In the game. What hurt the Red Wings, kind of twofold. I did not think that they defended well without the puck. Case in point, the Lightning scored 5 goals and only had 43 shot attempts.
Right.
And they had a lot of scoring chances. Even beyond the 5 goals that they scored, they had other chances that didn't go in. And their penalty kill is a train wreck. Their penalty kill is 31st, was 31st going into that game, under 70%. They gave up 2 power play goals to the Lightning, and I believe Dallas scored. I can look this up quickly because it was just yesterday. Let's see what Dallas did on the power play. Dallas got a power play goal on them. In fact, they went 1 for 1. So since they entered the game against the Lightning with a penalty kill percentage of 69.3, the Red Wings have had 4 penalty kills and allowed 3 power play goals. So their percentage has gone down. These are important components that the Red Wings are going to have to figure out if they are going to stay in the race. It's kind of like what I've been saying about Boston. Like, Boston just needs to get better overall metrically if they're going to stay in the race, honestly, the way some of these other teams in the Atlantic and Metro are playing. Detroit cannot rely on a 50% efficiency rate on the power play for the rest of the year. So they are going to have to expect that percentage is going to go down, and it did. They only got 1 power play goal against the Lightning in that one game. And they're going to have to figure out some stuff defensively, both 5-on-5 and on the penalty kill. But for the Lightning, what they were able to do to win that game, they had a terrific stretch in the opening 5 minutes or so of the first period, and then they'd have a terrific stretch at the beginning of the second period. And it was during that time that they did most of their offensive damage. Points scored 2 minutes into the game. And the Lightning made a 1-0 game 4-0 in the opening, 3:58 of the second period. And then one other big goal was scored on the shift after the Red Wings got their goal on the power play. Sherratt takes a penalty, and the Lightning score in the ensuing power play to kind of pull momentum away from the Red Wings and reestablish a 4-goal lead. That was kind of against flow of play. The Radish goal, that was Kucherov's 600th assist. But it was a big goal because it kind of kept the Red Wings down as much as they had been prior to Raymond's goal. But the rest of the game, the Lightning did not handle their business very well. They had problems with puck management. They had problems getting the puck back from Detroit. They gave up lots of shots. They gave up lots of scoring chances. They flirted with disaster, taking 6 penalties. The Lightning had an issue with at least one of those where, 5 of the 6 penalties were taken by Eyssimont and Chaffee, which is not great if you're a bottom 6 forward to be contributing to that many kills.
And they were bad penalties, too.
Right.
They just
but
weren't.
The one that Eyssimont was called for off a face-off win by the Lightning in the offensive zone, it was in the defensive zone. It was in the offensive zone, yeah. The Red Wings player tripped over the official. I don't know if you watched. They mic'd up Cirelli, and Cirelli was kind of giving it to the official after that penalty, saying, hey, he tripped over the official. The linesman had dropped the puck and then tried to get out of the way, and the Red Wings player was getting out to the point and tripped, but Eyssimont was there too. So Eyssimont got a tough call there. But, look, a lot of the other penalties were penalties, and they were avoidable. Honestly, they were avoidable. A lot of them were in the offensive zone or in the neutral zone where there was no scoring chance there for the Red Wings. So the Lightning did not play their best, but I'm going to go back to what I said, Greg, after the Anaheim game. Given the schedule, where they are in this month, given the fact it was a divisional opponent that was nipping at their heels, I'm really not too concerned about how that game went. The fact is the Lightning flirted with trouble, but Vasilevskiy bailed them out, and they got through 5 of the 6 penalties. And they scored. So, look, they took advantage of their offensive chances, which helped offset a shot disadvantage of 40-22 and an attempt disadvantage of 77-43. Those are ugly numbers. But the Lightning had a big lead, not even 25 minutes into the game, and that was enough. I do think they're going to have to play better, honestly, tonight and on this road trip. But look, they only have 6 home games this month with all these road games, and they've played 4 so far, and they've won all 4. That is huge. It's like, don't ask me how, ask me how many right now. Normally, I'm an ask me how.
You are. This is kind of this is nice. This is a nice deviation part.
I wrote a column yesterday on the plane, and I actually, because I know that Cooper had said, I can't remember ever having 16 games in a month before, and then the Lightning looked it up, and I'm like, I reached out to Ben Pierce. I'm like, do you have that record of like how many times the Lightning have played 16 games in a month? So he sent it to me. So the Lightning have played 16 games in a month 8 times in franchise history. This is the 8th time. They've never played more than 16. And let's remember, it was supposed to be 15. They had the game from Carolina moved to this month, so it became 16. Mm-hmm. This is not the hardest one. The hardest one actually was the first one. But that happened in the 03-04 season in January when that Lightning team took off. And well as the Lightning played in the 2019-2020 season when they had that stretch that we talked about, 23-2-1, I don't know that I've ever seen a Lightning team play better in a regular season stretch than that 03-04 Cup team did in a stretch of about 2.5 months that started in January. It started in that busy month, and they just rolled. I think they had 2 regulation losses over the span of like 2 months plus, and
they were dialed
it just clicked in. They were playing like a Cup champion. But that trip, they had to go out to Western Canada in January, and then later, I think in the same month, they went to Colorado and had a lot of road games and they had a lot of travel.
Yeah.
This one may not quite compare, but it's close. And then that team had the second 16-game month the same year in March. Yeah. So they had 2 in the same season and did well in both. The next one was before Cooper took over as head coach, 09-10. That team wasn't competitive. They missed the playoffs. They had a tough month. Cooper has had 5. I can say without hesitation, Greg, this is the hardest of the 5. Either they haven't been on the road as much, or they've never played 10 games on the road when they've had 16 games in a month under Cooper. One year they had 9, but that was the year actually in 2021 when, you'd go to Chicago and you'd play 2-3 games in a row. So there were more road games than normal, but the travel wasn't as intense.
Yeah, a little manageable.
And then in some other months, they've had maybe 8 road games, but they've stayed in the East. This has been a grueling stretch. And we talk about 16 games in 29 days. It's really the 14 games heading to the end of this road trip. Because after this road trip ends, the Lightning do get a little bit of a break. They get 2 days off from Saturday to Tuesday before they resume their schedule, and they start a 5-game homestand. So it's almost like the last 2 games in January.
Yeah.
We can almost separate and look at these 14 games where they went to California, came home for basically a breath, played 3 and 4 on the road, came home, exhaled, and now we're back on this road trip. So I repeat, for the Lightning to get the wins in the 4 home games during this crazy stretch, huge.
Yeah.
And look, they've played better, but they got the wins. So we'll see what happens on this road trip. It's a tough trip, 2 back-to-backs, 3 divisional games, quality opponents.
Sure.
Particularly at the beginning. I mean, Toronto's in first place, and Montreal has been playing very, very well. We'll see how they do. But I think the balance is going to shift here once they get on the other side of this road trip, even though they have 2 games left in January.
And I think to get on the other side of this trip with your head above water, not struggling, is a big deal. And, they're munching some points. And we've talked about that before. I think, Vasi, outstanding again.
Yeah, I kind of
this
rolled
is-
into the 16.
That's okay. No,
game
I mean,
mark.
it
But yeah,
makes
give me your
sense.
thoughts on the Detroit game.
No, it makes sense. I mean, look, everybody's talking about the Kucherov play.
Yeah,
that
was
the
incredible.
I mean, that one of the great elements of doing what we do for a living is that sports are unique for a variety of reasons, but they're not scripted. And you have a chance to see either history every night or brilliance every night. And you don't know when that's going to come. It could come in the form of, Andre Vasilevskiy, Dave, making 48 saves and being dynamite. It could be, Alex Nedeljkovic scoring a goal and getting an assist, and you're thinking that hasn't happened in a while. It never happened before. It could be Nikita Kucherov just dazzling with a remarkable individual play against the Red Wings, and that's what we saw. What was interesting, and I think Eric made this point, and I agree with it, Kucherov has the uncanny ability at the end of a game to look at the score sheet, and you're like, oh, he had 3 points.
Yeah.
And not that it's a quiet 3 points, but you're like, he picked up a secondary assist there, was maybe the primary assist here, and it's like, yeah, I mean, he had multiple points. And maybe not always he wows you with what he does from a scoring perspective. The passing usually, he opens up your eyes every single time. But when he's actually the one shooting the puck, you don't see it often. That from start to finish was a thing of brilliance. And I think
Yeah.
it benefited him. I think it was 2 forwards. Correct me if I'm wrong. 2 forwards on the Red Wings that he...
Kane and DeBrincat.
Yes.
Two
So
pretty
it
good
wasn't
players.
like they are
Yeah.
good players, but they're not great defensive players is what I'm saying. So it wasn't like he was going against Nicholas Lidstrom and Cronwall
Mm-hmm.
the back end. He got some offensive players that were caught in a position where they were a little vulnerable, and his ability to bob and weave a little bit and then finish, that is a highlight reel goal, and that is a goal that if it's not in the top 5 at the end of the year, I think it's going to be in the top 10. That's just my opinion. That was a thing of brilliance, and that was fun to watch. I think it got everybody out of their seat.
Yeah,
Your call
and-
was spot on with, I think, the way everybody felt.
Yeah,
about
and
that play.
it came less than 2 minutes after Gensel had scored in the power
Correct.
play.
Yep.
So it's like if you're Detroit, you're like, we should be tied or
Yep.
maybe even up after the first period because they were extremely dangerous in the first period.
Yes.
And that game could have been 1-1 or Detroit up, but it was 1-0 Lightning. And if you're Detroit, you're like, okay, let's just keep doing what we're doing. They come out of the gates in the second period, and it's like boom, boom, boom. All of a sudden, it's
Yeah.
4-0. I give them credit. Like the Red Wings didn't stop pushing; they continued to press, but that was a kick to the gut where the Lightning scored not necessarily on successive shifts, but one goal soon after the other. And, Kucherov was involved in 3 of the 4 goals the Lightning scored in the second period, 2 of which were on the power play. And I do want to bring this up to talk about the Gensel goal because that was we'll call it the righty unit, but Gensel is a lefty. He and Kucherov are the only 2 lefties on that unit. So Hagel draws the penalty right off the faceoff to start the second. So the Lightning, 4 seconds into the second, get a power play, and they win the faceoff, okay? So, again, with this righty unit, you have Radish at the center point, and he scored from there later in the period. You have Chafee in the bumper spot, which is, let's be honest, the most dangerous spot on the ice.
Yep.
And then you have Point at the left circle, and Gensel is free to basically rove. Like, he can make himself available to Kucherov in the corner. He can go to the front of the net. He can move to the other side if it comes to Point and make himself available there. And so I see they're lowering the curtain on me. I should turn my camera around. It's going to get darker here. They don't want I'm sitting
And
in
then the lights
loge.
go out.
There's nothing happening on the ice that I need to see, but now I am literally blindfolded from I'm blindfolded, but I have an obstructed view. Tuck the
Partner,
tuck
as long
the
as you
curtain
have the
and see
mic
what-
in your hand,
Yeah,
we
you
can
the
hear you,
camera is pointing
yeah.
at me.
Yeah, you're good. You're good.
Anyway, so what I've noticed in the 2 goals that Jake Gensel has scored since the Lightning went with this different setup, he has been in front of the net. And remember, it was Anthony, right? It was
Yeah,
like Jake Gensel needs to be in front of the net screening Kucherov. Jake Gensel is not in front of the net screening Kucherov, but he was in front of the net screening on the Radish shot, which came from the middle. That went straight in. What happened on Gensel's goal, though, Gensel goes to the front of the net, and if you watch the replay, Ben Sherratt is the penalty killer that is basically closest to the net. And he drifts up because he's worried about Chaffee. You can see him, like he is concerned that Kucherov is going to get the puck to Chaffee. So Chaffee's presence there, and the fact that there is a righty there who can shoot a one-timer, pulled Sherratt away from the net enough that Gensel was able to slip in behind him, get the puck. And I mean, Gensel is like, he's as close to Talbot as I am to Phil in the booth, right? Like,
Right.
I mean, there's nobody around him. And you might say, like, great pass from Kucherov. It was a great pass. Kucherov recognized what was happening, right? So to Gensel.
Sure.
Gensel's like, I'm going to make myself available here in front of the net. Why was there no penalty killer there? There was no penalty killer there because of the Chaffee threat, right?
That is right. That is
so
correct.
it's kind of like,
That is correct.
how are you building this power play? So if Sherratt doesn't go out to challenge Chaffee, maybe Kucherov goes to Chaffee, and Chaffee gets a grade A if he can get the shot through, get it past, because in this instance, Sherratt would be in between Chaffee and the goalie. So, again, the way the Lightning have set up these two power plays, and right now, basically, it's the righty unit that is converted in the last couple of games, although I guess Sorelli scored on the one. So the lefty unit has got 1 goal, the righty unit has gotten 3 in the last 2 games since they went to this setup. Like you can see, it's a handful for the penalty kill unit. And then on the last goal, that was just a meat and potatoes. I mean, it's like Kucherov passes it to Radish, who has a bomb. He gets the shot through. Gensel is screening. Goes in, right? So we'll see if they're able to maintain their proficiency tonight. Toronto's a pretty good penalty kill. They're 11th in the NHL. But this has been a bold move, like I said. Because you're basically saying, Victor Hedman, you're our most dangerous offensive defenseman. We are pulling you off the power play that is going to start most power plays.
Sure.
Brandon Hagel, you have been a huge asset to this top unit this year. We are pulling you off this unit that is going to start most power plays, at least it has in the last couple of games. And we're putting in Radish, who can play the power play, but generally doesn't play as much, and Chaffee, who's a bottom 6 forward. We're putting them on this unit that's going to see a lot of time. But we like this because it is spreading the wealth, and it's giving us 2 very dangerous and different units, different-looking units.
Yep.
That the penalty kill units are going to have to adjust to depending on who is out on the ice.
But the one
That was a
constant-
big goal scored by Gensel, too. I mean,
was.
the Kucherov goal was the goal of the night.
everybody talking
But
about
the
right?
Gensel goal, it's almost like Red Wings easily could be up. Now, all of a sudden, it's 2-0. Whatever it was, 16 seconds into the second period.
You mentioned the Chaffee goal. Chaffee, that's a big goal, and I know Phil
Yep.
talked about it right on his call when you had it. That was a big goal for that line. Atkins makes a good play. Atkinson
Yeah.
makes a good play behind the net. Chaffee, we've been talking about the bottom 6, middle 6, whatever you want to say. They've got to contribute a little bit offensively. He took a bad penalty in that game, but to get a goal in some ways offsets that. But it was good to see him fill the net a little bit because he's somebody we've talked about, has a good shot. You want to see him use it
Yep.
a little bit more. And he
Great
did that.
finish there into the top
was.
of the net. Yeah,
It was.
got it off
And
quickly.
I also want to give credit to Nick Perbix on the first goal. Maybe more of an underrated play, but that goal, in many ways, was impacted by a couple of passes Perbix made at the right point. I forget who his initial pass was to a Lightning player cutting into the zone. Gave it to him quickly. Then he got it back. And then he makes a quick pass to Lilleberg, who then fires it wide purposely.
Well, it hit
and-
Larkin's
or
stick.
it hit somebody, right.
Yeah, it
So
hit
maybe not
Larkin's
purposely.
stick, but still, he was open.
And Perbix found 2 open guys. It was funny. The first pass led to the open player on his second pass. And we've talked about Perbix all year. He's played well, and I thought that was an important play. And the Lightning, to their credit, they were able to finish, and they made Detroit play from behind.
Yeah.
So we can talk about Detroit and the winning faceoffs early on.
Yeah, that was another huge
was a
advantage
big deal.
they had in the first period.
They had a lot of shots. They had some zone time. So we can talk all about that, and maybe the Lightning didn't have their A game, as you and I have discussed. But that all, in many ways, speaks to a really good team when you don't have it, and you can still jump on a team and make them play from behind. And teams play differently when they're from behind. That's how it is. Doesn't matter how well you're playing. If you're playing well, but you find yourself down 3-0, 4-1, the dynamics change a little bit for you.
Mm-hmm.
And credit to the Lightning, almost like a veteran pitcher who didn't have their stuff, but found a way to get a win. And I think that's what you alluded to at the beginning of this broadcast in many ways, and that was really nice to see. So, all in all, I thought just a like you, looking at the results, not necessarily of how they got it, but I do think there were some moments in there where encouraged you about maybe even some individual performances that they can carry that on.
Lilleberg, I mean, we can talk about
Sure.
Crozier, but Lilleberg essentially filled in for Chernak on the penalty kill.
He did.
He was out there with McDonough.
How many minutes did he play?
I can get that in the game sheet here. So Lilleberg's overall minutes, 21:45. Phil made him a star on our broadcast.
Yep.
He played 6:49 shorthanded, second only on defense to McDonough. Sorelli played 7:05 shorthanded.
Yep.
I mean, the Lightning were shorthanded a lot because it was 6 kills. That's 12 minutes. The one goal that the Red Wings scored came with like 3-4 seconds left in one of those power plays. So basically, you're looking at like 11:55, 11:56 of penalty kill time without Eric Chernak, one of your top penalty killers on D, and you're asking Lilleberg to move to the other side, which he did. I mean, it's less important, honestly, on penalty kill in terms of like defending the rush coming at you or moving the puck out of the defensive zone when you're on your offside when you're killing a penalty. But still, you have to be aware of where your stick is, right? And where the pressure is coming.
Yep.
And I thought the Lightning met the challenge on the PK. And Vasi came up with some very big, timely saves.
He was really good. And this is, I mean, is it safe to say, if you factor in last year, that a lot of people maybe want to give him mulligan because of everything, coming back? This is the longest he's played at a very high level in the last couple of years. It feels like every game we're talking about, boy, he was really solid. Or Vasi really didn't give him anything,
Well, I mean, it's strange because you look at his game by game, and he had a long stretch of like 1 against or 2 against, and then he hit that, Boston, Anaheim, where he gave up 4 to Boston.
Sure.
They scored 2 empty netters, and Anaheim did score 3, but he was outstanding in that game. And I would say this, Greg, I think he's been giving the Lightning very good goaltending from the beginning of the season, with the odd exception. The 2 Toronto games are 2 of those exceptions.
Right.
But I think he's playing his best hockey. When I say now, I'm not talking recently. I'm talking like the last 2 months. I think his game has gotten stingier, basically.
Yeah, I would agree. And that's a good sign.
Yeah.
That is a very good sign as this team enters into not only the busy part of their schedule, but you want to be playing well, right? I mean, if you believe in that saying that you want to be playing your best hockey heading into the playoffs, and Vasi's starting to round into form, and he has been for a little bit now, that's a very encouraging sign for Tampa Bay. You mentioned Crozier. Let's dive into him first.
Yeah.
We can get into Toronto. It's one game, and I think was his appearance one of the more anticipated appearances we've been wanting to see over the last couple of years. I mean, we've been talking about Crozier for a while, and I think rightfully so. You don't get into a playoff game last year without, I think, a lot of people looking at him and saying that's usually a pretty good sign that something positive is going to happen for you to start the season the following year. It didn't happen for a variety of reasons. But I think we had kept saying, boy, they got this guy in Crozier. They must have really liked him because he's playing a playoff game last year. Mm-hmm. He looked really good in the regular season when they had him in there. He's done nothing but impress. And we kept saying, okay, at some point we are going to see him. Lightning's back end has been really good this year, too.
The
And
Lightning
that's the other thing.
basically got 2 for 1 in terms of the D swap over the offseason because McDonough arrived and Moser was traded for Sergachev. So off last year's team, pull Sergachev off and add 2 players, Moser and McDonough. It just bumped Crozier down 1 extra spot, and where the Lightning are with, managing the cap and everything else, and they want the guy to play, there just hasn't been an opportunity. But now, and also he was hurt. When the Lightning had a shortage on D, Crozier was hurt.
Yep.
Now you got Moser injured and Chernak out, and Chernak being a righty, Crozier comes up. So I'm gonna use a strange analogy here, but I think you'll understand where I'm going with this. So as you know, Stella is a certified therapy dog, and she and I have been going to TGH since 2021. So when we got her, I was like, boy, she would be great at, visiting hospitals, and because she's just so friendly and loves people, whether she knows them well or not, which is a quality you need to have. So I did some research about how to get your dog certified to do therapy, and I ended up getting her certified through an organization called Alliance of Therapy Dogs. So the way that the dog kind of passes the test, there is an evaluation, but the evaluation happens. There are 3 different evaluations that are separated by X number of days. I think we did it almost a week apart. So the evaluator watched Stella in basically a public setting, interacting with people on 3 different days. And the reason for that is they want to ensure that the dog they see on day 1 is the same dog. The dog just didn't have a good day, right?
Sure.
So
Every dog can have a good day.
if you see the dog
Yeah.
interact the same way over a period of time, and you're like, okay, pass, right? And Stella passed. This is what I'm thinking about with Max Crozier. So, yeah, it's his first game this year, but this is basically the same guy that we saw last year.
Yeah.
Over 13 games from the second half of the year through the playoffs. So he wasn't with the Lightning the whole second half of the year. He came up, he played some games, he went back, came up again, he was, there at the end of the season, got into the playoff game. It's the same guy. We're seeing the same player. This is who he is. Makes good decisions with the puck. Poised. Got a little snarl to his game. Not like Lilleberg, but he won't back down.
Nope.
He got into some
Patrick Kane's
post-whistle
face,
stuff. Yeah. Very, very impressive. I mean, does this mean that he's going to have the exact same performance every single night? No. I mean, every player has some good games and some less good games. That's just the nature of being an athlete and playing at the highest level. But we know who we have if you're the Lightning. You're saying we know who we have in Max Crozier because we've seen him play enough in the NHL, and it's not just a small window. Yeah, it's only 14 games plus 1 playoff game, but those 14 games have taken place over a rather extended period of time against different opponents, too, in different roles.
And
playing on the third pair. He played with McDonough against Detroit. He's going to play with McDonough again tonight against Toronto. He very well may be out there against Toronto's top line. If Ryan McDonough, you would figure Ryan McDonough is going to go out and play against Matthews, Nyes, and Marner. I believe that's their top line. For sure it's Matthews and Marner. I can check that. Then Max Crozier is going to be out there too, right?
That's a big test.
Yeah.
And that'll be a fun
very
one.
big test. I can actually look up how Toronto ran their lines.
Is Tavares back?
No, he's out.
He's out.
It is Nyes. Yeah, Nyes is the left winger on that line.
Gotcha.
And look, the Lightning may not be able to match, but they're going to want McDonough out there against Matthews. And McDonough is out there against Matthews. I figure, based on who his partner is, that unless it's a very specific situation where they're like, okay, we need to get Hedman out there with McDonough maybe or something like that. Crozier's going to get a pretty big assignment tonight.
Does that give us any indication, partner? And this is me and you spitballing. We can't get inside the coach's brain, so we understand that. But it's not like you're a young guy coming up and you're going to be playing in the bottom pair. You're going right with the Lightning's best defensive defenseman. Most likely you're going to be drawing the toughest assignments. For a younger player like that to be put into that situation, does that give us an indication of potentially what they may be thinking of him moving forward? Now,
Chernak I think he's got the poise. Like, he's got the demeanor, and by temperament, I'm talking about kind of like how he looks on the ice, that he looks unaffected by the moment, right? And by the assignment. You're just like, okay. You know?
Well, no doubt. And I think, let me rephrase it. Chernak is healthy. He will be going back right with McDonough. I think we all understand that. What I'm saying is where he's being slotted in and who he is playing with. Does that make it a little bit easier to say, look, I mean, if you have that much confidence in a player like that, should you make the case that he needs to be playing regularly at the NHL level when it's all said and done and everybody's healthy? I understand I'm opening up a can of worms, and I know there are Moser, you need to get back healthy.
Mm-hmm.
Radish and Perbix certainly are going to have a say in this. Lilleberg's not coming out of the lineup, but don't you find it interesting, though, that it's not like it'd be the equivalent of a forward from Syracuse being put up on that first line. And you're almost saying to yourself, like, that guy to me means we really like him. And we're going to give him a big role.
I think that's part of it.
Yeah.
But I think the other part of it, which we have to acknowledge, is the Lightning are really happy with the other two pair.
Fair point.
Hedman Radish has been great, and we've talked about Lilleberg Perbix. I mean, Crozier has a lot of experience playing with Lilleberg, but I think they don't want to touch Lilleberg Perbix. So where are you going to put Crozier? Okay. I hesitate to call him a kid. Like, he's in his mid-20s, but yeah. I will. Like, the kid can handle it. That's what they're saying.
The kid can handle it.
He showed us last year he can handle it. Playing against Detroit. Look, Detroit maybe doesn't have an Austin Matthews, but they've got maybe I shouldn't say that. Dylan Larkin's like among the league leaders in power play goals, and Patrick Kane is one of the greatest players ever to play, and he can still dance.
100%.
Like, he handled that assignment, and it was a game in which the Lightning gave up a lot of puck possession. So those were hard minutes for the Lightning. Much of the game on Saturday.
Yeah.
So Crozier met the challenge. He played over 14 minutes.
He looked good.
14:25. 2 shots. He got his shots through from the point. You love to see, like, little wrist shots. 4 saves, +1.
Now, listen, we're going to say this, and he's going to be a -4 tonight.
Well, I mean, it can happen, right?
Yeah, it can happen, right.
Ryan McDonough was -4 in a game. I forget which game. Maybe it was Western Canada, or it was the Montreal game. Maybe the Montreal game at home. McDonough strangely was -4.
He's
it can
open
happen
up
to
eyes.
the best of them. But Crozier is an NHL defenseman who right now is too far down on the depth chart for the Lightning to be able to play in the NHL.
And what does that say that we've been talking about the Lightning's back end? It is
and the Lightning don't want to carry
No.
basically 8 defensemen.
Sure. It's deep.
Yeah.
I'm going to get to my bold prediction here in a little bit.
Yeah.
Anthony says, not a fan of JoJo and net tonight. Vasi's rolling and ready to make a statement against the Leafs. I think first place in the division is a big advantage this year and worth the risk. Obviously, they still win, but process over outcome in every decision. So, I mean, look, the decision to start Johansson tonight, that's fair. You can quibble. You can quibble. I mean, do I want to see your best
hindsight will be
against?
20/20 in this instance, right after
I was
the game.
surprised. I mean, I Vasi against the Maple Leafs. So to me, it doesn't matter where it is on the schedule. That's who I want.
Mm-hmm.
But I understand you're finessing this too.
Yeah.
There's a reason behind it. I do kind of agree with you on where are we slotting in with the division. I think that'll
I
be
don't
an
know if
interesting
that's it.
talking
I mean,
point.
I was speculating that was it.
It probably isn't. But
I think Johansson's getting the Chicago game. Maybe they're like, we don't want Vasi to sit from Monday to Saturday.
And that could be a
two.
And that could
that might be part of it.
A lot of reasons why. But I think it's fun to debate them. Bolts fan says Vasi was amazing. Crozier did really well and deserves a roster spot. Lily's continuing to impress. His PK did well. While maybe unpopular, I don't think Geeky is ready to center a line. that line continues to struggle with him on it, regardless of the parts.
So, look, I can get to the elephant in the room. The bottom six did not have a particularly strong game against Detroit. Even though, like you mentioned, Atkins set up Chafee, and that was a big goal. It was a big goal.
It was a big goal.
But I think the Lightning are still looking. So after the Anaheim game, if you remember, I said, I like AC Mont, Glendening, and Gergensons as a line. I do. I think the coaches like it too. But heading into the Detroit game, they moved Gergensons onto the line with Geekie and Chafee. And as we said, Chafee scored his goal out there with Atkinson and Glendening. So, I mean, they were mixing through the game anyway. And one of the reasons they were mixing is they weren't really getting what they needed, honestly, from the bottom six. Because in the first period, as the Red Wings started to take control, the point line and the Cirelli line were doing okay. And it was the other two lines that were getting stuck in their own zone. And then basically all the lines got stuck in their own zone as we got out of the first few minutes of the second period, and the Red Wings really dominated possession. So for tonight's game, they're going, at least how they ran the lines this morning, they're going with the same setup with Gergensons on the quote-unquote third line with Geekie and Chafee, AC Mont with Glendening and Atkinson. We'll see. The Lightning don't have the last change here, and the Red Wings may look to get a matchup advantage. That's certainly possible. And if that's the case, those lines are going to have to step it up. They're going to have to step it up.
What do you think? Is it as obvious as Gergensons, they like maybe his jam that he plays with and maybe can open up some things with his forecheck as to why maybe being elevated
I
to
think
a third line?
I mean, we're calling it the third line. As I said after the
that
Anaheim
could be the fourth
game, really
line.
was the Glendening line that was being used like a third line.
Right.
I don't know. I mean, if I didn't ask any of the coaches, and even if I asked something like that, I probably wouldn't get a straight answer. But it may be just that line was constructed in the Anaheim game, the line that got benched in the second half of the third period. The Lightning are like, okay, we need to shift things with this line.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to pull Gergensons off this other line, which has been doing well. And again, Gergensons is getting 1 to 2 scoring chances a game. I mean, it's not the be-all, end-all, but that's a positive sign, right, that he's doing that. He had a couple of chances against Detroit as well. So they're seeing him play this way. It's like, let's spread things out in the bottom six. This has started happening essentially when Geekie got moved off the Cirelli line.
Yep.
Once you're moving Geekie off the Cirelli line, you're putting Paul on the Cirelli line. Now you've got to figure out how you're going to construct the bottom six without Nick Paul, who is a stabilizing presence in the bottom six if he's a third line center, basically. Sure. Once you're pulling him out of there, how are you going to construct the bottom six in a way that allows you to either get momentum, keep momentum, don't surrender momentum? I still think it's a little bit of a work in progress.
You know, reading the tea leaves for me, because you're going to need, you can't have lines, you can't have players that have no goals, 2 goals consistently on your third and fourth lines. You're going to need to find somebody in there who can elevate their play offensively to the point where they can give you a little bit of protection if your first 2 lines aren't scoring. I actually think Paul moving up to the second line was the Lightning's way of saying it stabilizes us in our top 6. Maybe Geekie eventually is a top 6 forward, and maybe in a perfect world, Dave, Nick Paul is centering your third line.
Mm-hmm.
But I think right now where this team is, I think they want to get the first 2 lines set in stone to a degree, as much as you can.
Yeah.
And then your third and fourth lines are going to be either what we saw the other night, mixing and matching, until you find, some guys within the system who can elevate and solidify, or you go outside and do the same thing. And I think Nick Paul, I think we like him a lot, and I think Nick Paul will be fine on a second line. I think if this team is really humming, and is as deep as we hope, Nick Paul most likely is on a third line. But they're not there yet, and that's okay. They still have some time to figure that out. The Gigi situation, I think that was the great wild card coming into the season. He makes the team out of camp. You never want to put a ton of expectations on a young guy like that. But we also knew the upside was probably greater than any of the younger players in that bottom six that you could potentially have who might be able to give you something you didn't give you something you thought maybe you potentially didn't have coming into the year. So a Glendening and a Girgensons, I don't think he anticipated a lack of offense as much as we're seeing right now. And Geeky maybe was the one guy who you looked at and said, look, we're going to give him an opportunity. I think he has the opportunity to really elevate guys, but you just don't know because of his age.
Yeah.
And I think this is the whole part of what Julian is looking at when it comes to the process. Eventually, what is he going to have to look at to get there to elevate the bottom six? So
you're looking at it from the GM's perspective, and we've talked about this because the fan asked about Geeky. Geeky is a center. Geeky at some point, I think, in his career trajectory, will settle in as a center. He will be a center. The reality is that what he is going through is not uncommon. The high points that he has had this year hopefully will become kind of standard regular play for him as he gets older and more experienced. But for a young player, it is not uncommon to see kind of if you want to use the term peaks and valleys, that might be a little inaccurate, honestly, but just he's in a rut right now, and he is going to have to pull himself out of it, essentially, right? And that's what players do. He got to the NHL for a reason. He is going to pull himself out of it. It's just right now, the Lightning are looking at what they're getting, and they're like, okay, he's hit a little bit of a wall here as compared to what he was doing at the start of the year or earlier this year, and so we have to make an adjustment.
And I think the organization is looking at this and saying, all right, we really don't have things stabilized if we keep Paul on the third line because there are still some moving pieces there who he's going to play with that are up in the air. But we also know we just have one position that we need to kind of take care of on that second line, and we think Paul can do that.
Yeah.
And that's my thing. Like, get those two lines set. Okay, now the rest of the year, you got to find out what's in your bottom six. And I think that's what this whole thing will be about, which is going to lead me to my bold prediction.
Well, let me just interject. So what I want to see tonight,
yes,
and we'll talk about it tomorrow.
Yes.
For the bottom six, I want to see them have the puck in the offensive zone more than they are without the puck in the defensive zone.
Fair.
Regardless of how many points they get or don't get, if those six forwards come out of this game, and assuming the lines stay the same, with 0 points among them, but we can say they forced the Maple Leafs to defend the majority of the time that they were out there.
I like it.
That, to me, is a positive, and you would like to see them not get scored on, obviously, as well. So that's my wish list for tonight.
Makes a lot of sense.
Go ahead.
And I think that's fair. I think in order for the Lightning to address that scoring depth, there will be a move that involves a defenseman currently on the roster, not in the top four, and not named Emil Lilleberg. That will address a couple of things. A forward who is of some pedigree, who can help drive play on a third line, while also at the same time that's going to give Crozier an opportunity to be with a big club. So it's going to be a domino effect. That's my opinion.
Mm-hmm.
Take that for what it is. Curious to hear what our fans have to say, but I think that's what it's going to take to get the type of player to solidify your middle six. But the Lightning have depth on the back end. I think Crozier's knocking on that door. I think he helps your team from here on out. And let's see how they find a way to get him on the roster while also at the same time addressing a need when it comes to scoring depth-wise. Al says, Guys, Tampa Bay is off from February 10th to the 23rd. Is there a player freeze? Can they practice or can trades be made? Also, would it be wise to send Geeky and Crozier, if he's still up and down, to Syracuse to save cap space?
Those are great questions, Al. And I actually do not know what the CBA rules are relating to this break. It may be treated a little bit like an Olympic break. I'm not sure. I think there's going to be a trade freeze for sure.
Yeah.
I don't know about making players available to play in the minors, particularly if they don't have to clear waivers. And, Geeky certainly wouldn't have to do that. I don't know.
It is a good question. Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean, because the
that is a
NHL
good
season is
question.
going to keep going on, right? When all of this stuff is going on.
Sorry?
The minor leagues are still going to
Yeah.
be playing. I mean, they're not going to stop. Al also said, is it time for the organization to go back to what they do best, develop young players in the minors and bring them up when they're ready? Should Geeky go down at the break and get first-line minutes until he becomes a producer and develops into a pro?
I don't know about that. I do think that was the idea with Gonçalves, though. I said that at the time. And look, to Gage's credit, he went down. He had 2 goals in his first game. Bolts fan Syracuse was quick to point that out to us, but I even knew that before she posted it because I had seen that he had scored 2 goals. They had a tough game the next game. I think they got shut out. But that's what they need Gonçalves to do. I'm not sure if Geeky's in the same boat. He made the team. I mean,
I think he's here.
Hitting a rut is different than like reaching the point where like you need a reset, go play in the minors, right? So I don't foresee that happening.
I think he's here unless you make such a big trade and you bring in not only one but a couple of guys offensively that it's going to force you guys, the Lightning, to bump some of these players down to Syracuse or even out of the lineup. My sense is Geeky's still going to be here. And if that's the case, he's on a 4th line. I think they've made the decision to keep him up here, and he's best served getting NHL coaching and playing with NHLers for his development. I think that's what it comes down to. And he has shown flashes. I think to your point, he has shown flashes when it comes to that. We got a YouTube listener from Reddy. Says, tell the guys to be more physical. They are playing fancy, winning, yes, but can't get too far like that. Well,
I don't know. I mean, I think some of the players are playing physically. I actually like how the Lightning have been physical in the defensive zone to try and close off guys this year. Maybe that's a little bit of a tweak in their system.
Right.
They do have the fancy gene. You're right. It drives Phil crazy. And part of the reason that they only had, 22 shots on net, and what did I give you the numbers? 43 shot attempts is they did pass up some opportunities to shoot and tried to make a pass, and it got disrupted, and there was no attempt even. But that's kind of part of how they play.
Yeah.
Craig Berube was talking this morning about, like, he came in here. He's the definition of a meat and potatoes coach. Like, he wants his teams to play tough, to be hard to play against, to play in a straight line, to take risk out of their game. And the Maple Leafs DNA, particularly for their high-skill guys, is a little bit different, right? I mean, the Leafs and the Lightning have some players who like to make plays. And he's like, I give the guys credit. They bought in, and maybe it means that we've asked them to take a little pizzazz out of their offense for the greater good, but we can find a balance too. And I think you have to do that. Like, if you have creative players, you don't want to suffocate their creativity. So the idea is to find a balance.
Yeah, that's what makes them great. I think it's it is always interesting, players like Berube who played a certain way.
Mm-hmm.
And then they coach guys who weren't them as a player. I do think there is that balance. It's sometimes you just have to let your horses go, but I do understand that you do need, at some point, and usually you see this around playoff time, partner, you do need a certain buy-in to how you play.
Yeah.
You can get away with it a little bit more in the regular season, but come playoff time, you can't be making that behind that drop pass at center ice, and nobody's behind them to pick it up if it gets picked off. And what do we say about the Leafs to a degree. Time will tell if that's the case come playoff time.
Yeah.
Where are you? So that's where he's going to be tested and really evaluated in many ways. All right, so the game tonight is at 7:30.
Yeah, it is 7:30. That's because Amazon has this deal with Canada. With Canada. Amazon is airing Monday night games in Canada involving Canadian teams. So sometimes it's 2 Canadian teams, sometimes it's 1 Canadian team. Usually the game is in Canada, if I believe I'm remembering right. The last time the Lightning were in Toronto, it was the same deal. It was a Monday.
Yep.
And it was this Amazon broadcast, which John Forsland does the game, and Jody Shelley, who both work for U.S.-based teams, Seattle and Columbus. But they are here, and that's why it's 7:30. So look, would I prefer it to be 7, given the fact the Lightning have to go to Montreal after the game? Yeah, but the Lightning should get into their Montreal hotel probably about 1:30 in the morning. And, they'll have the morning off tomorrow, and it's a 7 o'clock game tomorrow against the Canadians, who are coming off a pretty impressive come-from-behind overtime win against the Rangers after they completely imploded the night before against the Leafs. They blew a 3-0 lead and lost 7-3 at home.
Unbelievable.
Yeah.
Be a tough game, though. We know that.
I do want to get to this maybe tomorrow, but we got a question from Jim from Jacksonville relating to a potential trade the Lightning would make where they would move Johansson at the deadline. So we'll get to that tomorrow, Jim.
I saw that one. I like that. It's outside the box thinking. We'll tell him why he's wrong, but I like that outside the box thinking. No, I'm joking.
We'll have the benefit of talking about it after Johansson
Jim, I
plays
talked about
tonight
that
against
last
the Maple
year.
Leafs. You did bring that up
I
last
mentioned
year.
that last year. I think that would have been
I was
time.
I was on the other end of that argument. But.
Well, I think you and I are probably both aligned on what the answer will be, but we'll give you our reasons for tomorrow. I will talk to you tonight. Closer to the puck dropping. That'll be a lot of fun. And we will talk to our audience tomorrow, noon to 1. So get those questions in at Bolts Radio. Hopefully we're talking about a win, and we'll preview the Montreal game. Partner, great job. And I will speak to you in a few hours. Thanks to Jared Johnson and Steve Versnick as well. And thanks to all of you for listening and participating. We appreciate it. I'm Greg Linnelli. You've been listening to Power Lunch on Lightning Radio.